Welcome to the Birth Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Hof, BSN RN. I am a wife, a mother of two, and a nurse specializing in the care of women and newborns. In this podcast, we will share powerful journeys of birth givers with the goals of lifting the veil on the birth experience, healing through sharing, and beginning an open conversation to strengthen trust and promote transparency between birthing people and healthcare providers.
Hello. Today I have with me Carrie Young. Carrie is the mother of two and the host of the Paths in Progress podcast. She is also a higher education professional. Today she is going to talk about her birth journey. Carrie, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm happy to be here.
I am excited to hear your birth journey. I have only heard the Cliff's Notes version, but today I get to hear the whole thing.
You get to all the fun details. So my journey really starts long before my actual births of my children because I had a very long infertility journey. I got married very young. We got married at 21 years old while we were still in college. So I think what comes with that is as you go through your life journey, people think you're going to have kids early because you got married early. And the longer you go without having children, people ask more questions because they're like, oh, you've already been married this long, longer than all these other people you're friends with. Why don't you have kids yet? And they start having kids. So that was really the difficult part of my journey. We finished college and I went to finished grad school, and we got out into the workforce and we decided to start trying to have a family. So we bought our starter home. We bought a small SUV, all those things you do as you're kind of moving in that direction. And we weren't getting pregnant. So I went to the doctor after probably about 12 months of trying, I guess. And then we started to do things like monitoring, taking your temperature, monitoring everything on the calendar, your fluid consistency, all those fun things. We started Clomid, charting stuff. And it's still, after 18 months, we still weren't getting anywhere. So we started doing a little more testing. We are very fortunate. We live in Houston, Texas, so we have the largest medical center in the country, and we have a lot of access to really great medical facilities and resources and research institutes and all of that. So I was going to a really fantastic fertility center. They have all of these different things in the same building that you can go to. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for people who are going through this process. So we had all of these different testings, all of this blood work. My husband got tested to make sure his sperm count and everything was okay. We did the DNA profiling to make sure we were compatible in that way. Everything was checking out fine. So we kept going. I had that procedure done where they put dye into your uterus and it goes up into your fallopian tubes to check to see if you have any blockages that aren't showing up on like an ultrasound. That was clear. I ended up having exploratory surgery where they stick a camera up there and explore all of the nooks and crannies to make sure there aren't any follicles or scar tissue or other growths or something that could be causing blockages or other problems. That was all clear. So it was good to go through and get all these boxes checked. Like, yes, this isn't wrong. This is fine. You're good here. But at the same time, we were getting absolutely no answers as to why we couldn't get pregnant. So my husband worked for a company that had pretty good benefits regarding fertility. So they covered, I think it was 6 cycles of artificial insemination. And when I say covered, I don't mean 100%, but it had some coverage to where it was helpful. So my doctor decided to do the artificial insemination, but do it in conjunction with the hormone shots that you would do for IVF, just to kind of give us a better chance. So we did that. We did 5 or 6 cycles of that and nothing. I do blood work every time. I would go in and get 2 or 3 ultrasounds per cycle to make sure I had eggs that were there, eggs that looked healthy, that they were releasing. And there were some times where she was like, oh my gosh, you've got 3 really great eggs that are releasing. You might have triplets if this works. It was that kind of thing where I was like, wow, they were creating this optimal situation to get pregnant, right? And it still wasn't working. And they didn't have any answers. So it was really really frustrating. At the same time, for us, it seemed like everyone around us was getting pregnant. So this was over the course of 8.5 years total. But particularly during that time, we had family members that were getting pregnant very easily, almost like, you kind of joke like they sneeze and they get pregnant, just very easily getting pregnant. Friends that would tell me, oh, we weren't intending to get pregnant yet, but oh, it happened, and that's great. That can happen for people. But when you're going through a really frustrating infertility journey, when that keeps happening over and over around you, it's really hard because you want to be happy for the people that you love. And we were happy for them, but it got harder and harder to keep seeing that happen, especially when we encountered friends and people we knew who didn't really want to get pregnant at the time that they did. It was just like this very spiritual, frustrating time for us, like sitting here begging for pregnancy, praying for pregnancy, wanting it so badly. And then to watch people get pregnant who weren't really seeking that was really hard. So we didn't have answers. So we got to the point where IVF was basically the only thing left. There's only so many cycles of artificial insemination that you should try when there's no problem and it's just not working. So we took a little break because we needed to figure out financially how that could work. There is a center outside of Dallas, and I don't know what it's called off the top of my head, but it is kind of a one-stop shop. One way IVF can add up is because you're paying all of these different facilities and doctors for all of the different things you have to do, particularly with storage and retrieval and everything. So there is a center in Texas that you can do everything there. And our doctor had a connection to that. I think she went to medical school with the couple that started it or something. So we were looking at their center in particular. And then my doctor, who had been with me through this whole journey, decided to retire very suddenly. Not retire completely from her career, but retire from seeing patients. I believe she lost her husband suddenly. She was also a researcher. So she decided just to change her career just to research so she could be more available for her children. So totally understood why she needed to do that. But it kind of put me back to square one because I had to find another doctor. And after we'd gone through all of these procedures with no answers, we were left with the IVF decision and left with trying to find another doctor. So we took a little break and we really were wondering if this is how it was going to be for us. We're very spiritual people, and we started to just really start asking, are we supposed to be doing something else with our lives that doesn't involve being parents? Are we supposed to go live overseas somewhere? Are we supposed to invest part of our life in something else? As we were going through this infertility struggle over these several years and going through all these procedures, and I just want to say this for people who maybe don't understand or who have people in their lives going through this, there's a lot of things kind of about everyday life that become really difficult when you're going through that. Even going to church became difficult for me because, you meet somebody at church, like, oh, how long have you been married? And we'd been married a while. When this started getting really hard, we'd probably been married like 10 years and we'd passed our 30th birthdays. And so people were like, oh my gosh, you're past 30, been married 10 years. Why don't you have kids yet? Sometimes they'd say jokingly, what are you waiting for? You got to get on that. And when you just found out you're not pregnant again for the 1700th time, that gets really difficult. And so stuff like going to church became difficult for me because inevitably a conversation like that would happen almost every Sunday. I'd get really upset. The car ride home, I'd be sobbing. It started to be not worth doing these normal things. Trick-or-treating, I stopped doing because I couldn't keep opening my door to all of these little kids that, and I didn't have. Mother's Day was the worst. I basically just locked myself in a room. Even seeing people's pictures on Facebook on like Easter, Christmas morning, like all of these holidays that are supposed to be really celebratory with family became very difficult for me to acknowledge and to see pictures of people and just to, I had to function in a different way to get through it. Baby showers were the other thing. I had one year where I think I had like 15 baby showers of friends and I'd gotten through, I don't know, like 10 or 11 of them. And one day I just kind of broke down before I was going to go. And my husband was like, you don't have to go to these. You can just not go. And for people who can relate to that time of life, it's just, you want to go celebrate each of your friends and especially their first babies, and you want to be there and do all of that. But it got so hard for me because, again, there were people at the baby shower every time I didn't know. Oh, how long have you been married? Oh my gosh, what are you waiting for? When are you going to have a baby? Just every time. And I just got to a point where I couldn't do it anymore. So I just had to kind of say, I'm not coming to baby shower. And I wouldn't announce it or something, but when I got a baby shower invitation, I'd usually text or email them and say, look, this is too hard for me now. I've been to so many, blah, blah, blah. And most of the time people are like, oh my gosh, I totally understand. And if the person didn't really know what I was going through, I just RSVP'd that I couldn't go, but it just got too hard. So that's something I think I wanted to say for people to think about and be aware of for people in their lives. If you have people in your lives, maybe they have been married a while, maybe they don't have kids, be careful about how you joke about that or ask people about it, because you really never know what people are going through. And something that seems really simple can possibly be a really hard day for them, or just a really hard thing to go through. Something that's supposed to be celebratory, right, can sometimes be really, really hard. So those things got to be really, really hard on me to do. So we started actually considering some other big life changes, wondering if that was what we were meant to do. We did decide we had moved way out to the suburbs, got this house, got this SUV because we thought we were having kids. And because it wasn't happening, our commute was really long, totally unnecessarily long because we were out there. So we decided to move back into the city, and we got a property that really needed a lot of renovation. So we decided to do that. We're like, we're going to move to our favorite area of town. It's kind of an artsy area of Houston, close to the opera company where we were singing and close to the university where I was working. So we thought, we'll just do this. We'll renovate this place. We'll live where we want to live, and we'll just maybe think about adoption, maybe think about some of these other options. So we did that, and we renovated a kitchen and a bathroom, and we had like 3 rooms gutted. I remember specifically gutting a bathroom, and I found out I was pregnant just out of nowhere. And people say that all the time, like in a really cheesy way, like, oh, just stop stressing about it and then you'll get pregnant, or just stop. And that's just such BS. I just wish people would stop saying things like that. If you just stop thinking about trying to get pregnant, then you just will. And please don't say that to people. It's not helpful. But because I was in a very stressful period. We were trying to gut a home, and I worked 2 jobs. And it was just like, it was not a lack of stress or lack of thinking about it or lack of, all of that. So anyway, got pregnant, and it was shocking in a way that, of course we were happy, but we almost couldn't allow ourselves to be happy. This is always hard to explain to people. When you go through infertility as long as we did, so we'd hit like an 8.5 year mark here, you almost can't fathom. It's really hard to wrap your brain around that this could actually be now, that this could actually be happening and be real. So we didn't tell a single soul for the first 8 weeks. We got to our 8-week appointment. No one knew we were pregnant. I took like 3 or 4 tests, by the way. Literally when I took the first test and it was positive, my husband's like, we got to take a couple more. We were like, this can't be right. It was just, we couldn't even wrap our brain around it. So I think I took like 4 multi-brand, multi-style pregnancy tests, and they were all positive. So I was finally like, I think this is real. And so then I'm just thinking, well, I'm probably going to lose it. We just could not wrap our brain around that this was real. So we went to the 8-week appointment, heard the heartbeat. I'm asking the doctor all of these miscarriage questions because I'm just thinking, surely it's not going to be this straightforward. We've never known what the problem is. Surely there's a problem we don't know about yet. So I'm asking all these miscarriage questions. So the only people we told after that 8-week appointment were our parents. We swore them to secrecy, not to tell anyone else, because I just kept thinking, surely this is not going to happen, like I'm going to lose it or whatever. And especially my husband's parents already had 4 grandchildren. My parents didn't have any grandchildren yet. I didn't want to get them so excited and then have something happen. So that's why we waited till after the 8-week appointment to even say anything. And so we went to the 12-week appointment and heard the heartbeat. She said the growth was normal, blah, blah, blah. And I kept asking miscarriage questions or what could go wrong kind of questions. And I'd had this doctor for more than 10 years at this point. And she just looked at me and she's like, Carrie, stop asking me these questions. And I was like, what do you mean? And she was like, you're at the end of your first trimester. Like, you need to stop asking me about miscarriage. And I was just like, okay. She's like, everything's fine. Cause I just couldn't, it's so hard to explain, but we couldn't even, because we'd been through so much, we had not allowed ourselves to celebrate that we were pregnant. We just couldn't. I don't know how to explain it. It was just so hard to believe after everything we'd gone through that this could actually be happening. So like that whole first trimester, I allowed myself a few moments here and there of like, oh my gosh, this might be real. This might be happening. But for the most part, we were not celebrating and doing all these things that people usually do because we just couldn't believe that it could be good after all the bad that we had gone through. So finally, we told people into the second trimester. I don't even remember how long it was. I think we even waited a couple of weeks after that. We had people that we wanted to call and tell personally, separately, before we kind of put it out into the world. But we did that. So we were trying to get through this home renovation, and which is also difficult while you're pregnant. I was still doing things while pregnant that I probably shouldn't have been doing because up to that point, we'd done all of the renovation ourselves, except for like electrical work and plumbing. So we had to start hiring more people to go faster and to do things that I could no longer do. So we tried to get as much as we could done, but we were really up to the wire on trying to get things done, particularly the room the baby was going to sleep in was not going to be done until the 11th hour. So one night we were sleeping in like a small bed in our guest room because our room was gutted and it had just been drywalled, I think. And it was dust everywhere. I couldn't want to sleep in there and breathe in all that. So early morning, like 4 a.m., I was feeling like kind of cramps and like really discomfort and some pain. But I was very groggy because it was still really early in the morning. And, I kind of looked at the clock a couple times and I was like, oh, it's not time to get up yet. I'm just like, ow, geez. Ugh, and turn over again. And then after like an hour and a half of that, I was like, wait a minute. I think I'm having contractions. And so I still waited a little longer before I woke up my husband. I think I waited till 6. And I was like, I think I've been having contractions the last few hours. And I had an app, which I highly recommend people use, that tracks your contractions. Say that 3 times fast, tracks your contractions. You can do like start, stop when the contraction starts and when it stops. And then it will make this whole graph and like tell you how far apart they are and how long, puts all your patterns in. It's really a fantastic tool. So I started using that. And they tell you to wait until your contractions are closer together to go to the hospital. So all day long, I'm having contractions. I had to call my boss and be like, I'm not coming in today. But I was like still not convinced I was in labor. I didn't know if it was Braxton Hicks. I didn't know what was going on. So they're like a half an hour apart. I mean, they were so far apart. I was like, okay, we can't go to the hospital yet. And then it got to be like very gradually like 25 minutes apart, then very gradually like 20 minutes apart, but it was all day long. So they'd started at like 4 or 5 a.m. I'm going all the way through the day. I get to dinner time, still same thing. They're starting to get a little bit closer to maybe 15 minutes apart. But anyway, it took until like midnight before we were like, okay, they're finally close enough together where we should go to the hospital. So we go to the hospital. And I wanted to make sure I'm not going to be sent home. So I wanted to wait long enough to have that make sense. So we get there and I had dilated some. So they got me a room. They said I could stay. They were close enough together. But it was still taking a while. I think I was like a centimeter an hour or something, maybe. I don't know. It was taking a while. And finally, a doctor came in and they're like, we think we're going to give you Pitocin to speed this up a little bit. And I was like, do I have to do that? Or can I just let this happen naturally? I was like, this is my first baby. I'd rather let this happen naturally if possible. And they're telling me these things like, we don't want something to happen and it's safer if we do it this way. And I was like, can I just wait 1 more hour and then we can talk about this again? And they were just like, sure, we can wait another hour. And one of the nurses had come in after the doctor left and she said, well, it's 12, 13, 14. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, the date, it's 12, 13, 14. So we have a lot of people here being induced. And I was like, so they can have that birth date, 12, 13. Like, I'm sitting here like, I'm 3 weeks early. I did not pick this date. I'm like, they want to give me this to rush it because there's too many people here voluntarily being induced because they want a particular birth date on the birth certificate. It's like, no, ma'am, I don't give a crap about what those, I was just like, you have got to be kidding me. So I was like, no, I don't care that people are coming in here because they want a certain date on their birth certificates. You're trying to rush me out. Like, I was just like, no. So I did end up finally doing the Pitocin because it had been, I think it was close to when we reached the 24-hour mark that I'd been in labor 24 hours. So it was like, okay, I'm open to moving this along a little bit. And really I know a lot of people have birth plans and try to do things a certain way and have different things in their room. And my dad's a doctor. So I grew up basically being taught, listen to your doctor and do what your doctor says. So I went in, the only birth plan I had is I wanted an epidural. I was 35 years old. So I was like, I don't need a medal for doing something like going through a particular experience or, I was like, I am an older new mom. I just want an epidural. Like that was my birth plan. Like whatever else happens, I will follow the medical advice of the professionals in the room, but give me the epidural. So I did get that. That was what I wanted. Yeah. So it ended up being 32 hours of labor and my little boy finally arrived, and there weren't any complications during the birth. They did do an episiotomy and then I tore more. So I know I told you this before, Kelly, I didn't have the worst tear you can get, but I had one notch lower than the worst one. So I do want to plug padsicles. If you are pregnant and you don't know what padsicles are, Google them because they saved my life. I'm so thankful. I don't even remember who told me about them or if I just found them on the internet. I can't remember, but it's basically a huge maxi pad and you're kind of making a popsicle with it, but you're filling it with rose water, not with the alcohol. You want the rose water that does not have alcohol in it, and lavender oil and aloe vera gel. You're like slathering it on. You're like filling the maxi pad with the rose water. You're putting some lavender oil and then you're slathering it in aloe vera gel. You're wrapping it back up in the packaging and sticking it in your freezer. But if you have a bad tear, even just regular stitches, padsicles are, oh my God, like I don't know what I would have done without them. So I have to plug that. Google padsicles if you don't know what it is. If you've already had your babies and you don't know what it is, tell everyone you know who's pregnant. I do. Like I will DM people, like former students of mine. I DM them and I'm like, padsicles, here's a link. You need to do this. Oh my gosh. I can't say enough good things about padsicles. They saved me. So yes. The other significant thing about my birth experience with both my kids, but it started with my first, obviously. What was unexpected for me, it was the lack of ability to nurse. I tried to nurse my son. They have all these consultants there and professionals there, and nothing was happening. He was losing weight, so we had to start formula, which he threw up constantly. My son was like a vomit fountain. That's another thing, but I could not nurse. And the really horrible traumatic part about the afterbirth for me was, so I had been up when my son was born and everything was done and we were finally holding him. I had been awake for 36 hours. And he was born around 2:30 in the afternoon. So, about dinner time, I'd been up for 36 hours. And then of course we didn't try to go to sleep until later that night. So I'd really been up more like 40 hours. And this nurse came in. I had not been able to nurse, nothing was coming out. I got a pump. I would pump for an hour and get one drop in there. They couldn't even get the drop with a syringe. Just nothing was happening. So she's like, well, we're going to wake you every 90 minutes. And I was like, I've been awake for 40 some hours And she was like, well, we have to keep trying. So they woke me up every 90 minutes for the next day and a half. So I left that hospital basically having not slept for like 4 days. And that is a terrible way to go home with a newborn. And a lot of people go home tired with their newborn, right? But I mean, I was like,
Are you pregnant and planning a hospital birth? You don't need a birth plan. You need a birth vision. In my opinion, birth plans set you up for failure. Yep, I said it. Hear me out before you turn off this podcast. You may think that by downloading a generic birth plan, it means you're in control. The truth is, it's not that simple. No one can control exactly how their birth will go. There are way too many variables. What every pregnant person wants is to walk into the hospital pregnant and to walk out with a healthy newborn in their arms. The journey in between is the murky part. It's hard to know what issues might come up that need to be addressed. If you focus your energy on a birth vision rather than giving your power to a birth plan, you can empower yourself to make the best choices for you and your baby. That's why you need to get into my Empowered Hospital Birth program. As a labor nurse and mindset coach, I can help guide you through the process of maintaining the calm autonomy that will help you achieve the birth vision you desire. In my Empowered Hospital Birth program, I will help you identify the source of anxiety you have surrounding hospital birth, fill in knowledge gaps to make sure that you are fully informed and confident, learn key phrases so you can better communicate with your medical team, emotionally process your fears so that they don't hold power over you. Go to kellyhof.com/empowered to book a free 30-minute private birth vision call, where we will identify your top fears and must-haves and gain clarity on exactly how you want to feel in the birth space. That's kellyhof.com/empowered. I'm honored to be a part of your birth journey.
the most tired of my life going home with my newborn. And that particular nurse was pretty cruel to me about it, basically talking to me like I wasn't trying hard enough. And I don't know how you try any harder when you have a breast pump attached to you and it's going for an hour. You can't try harder. Okay. Like if you're doing that every 90 minutes or every 2 hours. So I had a very difficult time with that. And I had a lot of mixed emotions, like a lot of people do. Like, of course, something else is wrong with me. What is this? And why can't this happen? And my mom flew in to obviously help, which I was 3 weeks early. So it was a little unexpected. But I remember because we were in the middle of this home renovation, I went home with this baby. And the next day we were having all the windows in our house replaced because we'd already scheduled it. They had been ordered and they were there because he came early. So my mom was staying in a hotel because of that. We had nowhere for her to sleep because everything's like gutted and a mess. And my mom was trying to mop up drywall dust from my bedroom when I got home. So I had somewhere to sleep. I mean, our house was a disaster. And I remember I went to the hotel room with my mom for a few hours so they could replace all the windows in my house. So I wasn't sitting in my living room with my newborn with all of the windows out and these workmen like hanging from the sides of my house replacing them. And we came back home and I tried the breast pump again. And I remember it was like, it's kind of comical thinking about it now, how stupid this was, but I had pumped for like 45 minutes and there was this tiny drop of what is this called, Kelly? Like the first liquid that comes out that's supposed to
Colostrum.
be super vitamin nutrition.
Colostrum.
Yes, colostrum. So there's like this tiny drip drop of it in there. And my husband's trying to get it with a syringe to give it to the baby. This is like day 3 of trying to do this. And my mom was like, you need to stop. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, it's not working. You're stressing yourself out. You're making yourself upset. You're sitting in a house that is half ripped apart. You haven't slept. It's not happening. It's okay. You have to stop. And it's sad that I had to get home after a few days and have my mom be the one tell me that. So I remember going to my first checkup with my OB-GYN, who did not deliver my baby, by the way. It's somebody else who was on call delivered my baby. So when I told her about this whole thing with the breastfeeding and how they kept waking me up, and it was very kind of cruel, I thought, the way they talked to me about it, she was livid. She was just like, this is not okay, that, this is how they talk to you, that this is what happened, that you kept pushing on after nothing was happening. So I'm pretty sure she must have put something in my chart or something for my next child, because they didn't say a thing to me. It was the same hospital. I even had some of the same nurses, but not the super mean one that I had the first time. But they didn't say anything. They just asked me, "Are you breastfeeding?" And I was like, "No." They were just like, "Okay." But after all I'd gone through with that breastfeeding with my son, we had given him formula and he threw almost everything up. I mean, and it was like, you look over at him in his little bed and it was like a fountain, just this arc coming out and vomiting almost every time. So he was still losing weight, even with just the formula. So we went to the doctor and it turned out he had an allergy to, oh shoot, I should have looked up the word for this. Anyway, he had to have a special formula because he had an allergy to something. So even if I could have breastfed, he would have had to have the special formula anyways. So it's like, I went through all that and it wouldn't have even mattered. Like, he would have still been vomiting and anyway. So he had to have a special formula, which was of course this tiny can that was like $50 a can, and it smelled terrible. But he eventually got out of that allergy after a year. He's eventually was able to drink milk and he's fine now. But we go through all of that and then it didn't even matter anyway. He had an allergy to drinking milk. So, yeah.
I just want listeners to know that you have the choice to decline to breastfeed whenever you want. When you feel like you need it, you have the choice to ask for formula. We can put in the chart, the parent was educated on the benefits of breastfeeding. And after that education, the parent has requested formula. That is okay. As long as you're feeding your child, it's okay. There's a big push, and I don't want to knock breastfeeding and I don't want to knock baby friendly, because I think educating people about breastfeeding is important, because if you can and you want to, it is a good thing to do. It is a challenge no matter what. And so I get that we are trying to encourage mothers to do it, even though they feel like they're not good at it, because most mothers are going to feel like they're not good at it. But if after pumping for an hour, you're only getting less than a drop, especially on day 3, your mom was right. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple times.
It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wasn't expecting too. I mean, when we're talking about the things we don't expect, right? Like, my mom had breastfed easily and different friends I had, it was not a problem. And so, I mean, I knew that some people struggled with it, but for some reason, whatever that was, I wasn't expecting it for me. And I wanted to breastfeed, but I wasn't expecting to just get nothing. I mean, and I had the heaviness feeling, like all of the feeling that they talk about when your milk comes in and everything feels heavy and it's achy. Like, I had all that feeling. So I was like, well, where's it going? It feels like it's there. Like, what's happening?
And usually when I'm educating moms, I will show them if there is milk coming out. If I can show them how to hand express breast milk and get the baby to lick drops off the breast, then I feel like we have a pretty good chance of being successful. Now, I'm not a lactation consultant. I've had training in breastfeeding because I'm a labor and delivery, and I've been a postpartum nurse, and I work in the special care nursery as well. So I've had training in breastfeeding. I don't say that I'm an expert in it, but that's just kind of how I gauge. I will try to help a mom hand express. I will help a mom physically latch. If we continue having problems from there, I will call the lactation consultant. But I'm always very open about moms having the choice and moms taking care of themselves and both emotionally and physically. If they feel like they are not in that emotional and physical place where they can feed their baby with breast milk, let them rest. People should be able to rest. And I'm really sorry that that happened to you. It's important to remember that moms are not just vessels for babies to be brought into the world and fed, that they are also human beings that deserve and need to take care of themselves and rest. So if you could go back and talk to yourself during that whole journey, what would you want yourself to know about the process that you went through that might help you or might help other people that are going through that journey?
I felt, it may have been a false sense of security, but I felt pretty ready and prepared. I think I took a class at the hospital and all of my close friends had had babies at that point. So many people had given me advice, whether I asked for it or not. So that was one benefit of being the last friend to have a baby. People had told me all kinds of things, including horror stories. I think I also had, because I was older, I was 35, almost 36. I'd had over a decade of watching my friends and family have babies. So I felt like I'd heard a lot and learned a lot, to where when I went into the labor space, I felt like I was ready for whatever, and I was okay with whatever. That was the thing. I don't want to say I was anti-birth plan, but I just wanted the epidural. That was my birth plan, like I said. Because I think coming from, my dad was a doctor, I just have a high trusted medical professionals, and the hospital I was at, and it's a very well regarded hospital for labor and delivery. I mean, that's where they life flight people when there's a problem, so I felt really confident and comfortable with the professionals and the environment that I was in for that experience. I will say, when it came down to it with my son, I had the epidural and my pushing wasn't effective in the beginning. And one thing that really helped me, the doctor that was delivering my baby had a husband who was a singer, and I'm a singer. So she said, I want you to imagine that your diaphragm sits like right under your breasts, basically. And so she's like, I want you to imagine moving your diaphragm down like an elevator to push the baby out. And that helped me tremendously, having that visualization, even though I couldn't feel things, imagining that anatomy movement, even though it's not really happening, but like that visualization really helped me. And then all of a sudden she's like, there you go. Now you're pushing the right way. So if that helps anybody out there, that's what really helped me. So that was the one thing that I was doing not well, that all of a sudden somebody gave me that visualization and tool. And if she didn't understand singers, I wouldn't have gotten that. So it was just kind of that serendipitous thing where she understood singers and their language and what we connect with. And so she gave me that, and that helped me.
Yeah, that's similar to what I tell moms, even if they're not singers. That movement, that visualization of shortening that area of your abdomen between your rib cage and your belly button. And I tell them usually to visualize there's a spring in between your rib cage and your abdomen, and you are compressing that spring to push down and push that baby out. And I see a huge difference whenever I say that. And the diaphragm, that's a good analogy also.
Yeah. Well, and even if you just do it, like she took her, I mean, I know the listeners can't see this, but she took her hands and pushed it down like an elevator. So just even seeing her do that, I was like, got it. And then, because I knew what the diaphragm was, she could do that. But you could also just be like, pretend like starting here, you have an elevator going down that you're pushing down, But I don't think that's really I don't remember them talking about anything like that in the class that I took, like how to push. And I don't know. I mean, maybe it's not important until you're in the moment, but I would hope people get some kind of language.
Yeah,
like
we
that.
Don't want you doing it until you're in the moment.
True. Let's not try
Let's
that.
not practice that.
Yeah. But even if it's some kind of imagery that you can click into or something, I think that's what really helped me. I'm a visual person anyway. Like I talk in visualizations a lot of times when I explain things to students. And so having that for me was really huge. So as far as like what I would tell myself or
anything like mindset to get you through the rough time, if there's anything that you've learned from it.
Well, I mean, the main part was, I think, speaking up for myself better, I guess, I did speak up for myself with the Pitocin, and because I'd had a lot of friends kind of give me that advice, like, you have a right to say you don't want that. But with the breastfeeding part afterward, I guess I would go back and tell myself to let it go sooner and to speak up for myself a little more as far as I need to rest. Like, can you please just give me 3 hours or something? And I didn't know that I could say that because I was very much in tune with do what the medical professionals tell you to do and trust that. And I think on the backside of things, that was not good for me to not stick up for myself in that way.
I like what you said earlier about when you realized that you had to have some boundaries with the baby showers in order to protect your mental health.
Yeah.
I think it's important to feel empowered to speak with your friends about what headspace you're in that moment, because most people will understand, and kudos to them for inviting you and involving you, because you don't want to be excluded, right? But also,
Right. I think there was that fear of that, but also the fear of, because I think people start thinking you're not happy for them. You know what I mean? And it's not that. It's really not that. You can be happy for them and also be in pain and frustrated by it, you know?
Yeah, it's important to continue to extend those invitations, but sometimes just a little message saying, I get that this might not be the event you want to attend. If it's too hard, I understand. I would love to have you there, but I will not feel hurt if you can't be there. And I think it's important to be open and honest about this motherhood journey with your friends, because not everybody's in the same space.
Yeah.
I remember, I didn't get married until I was 34. So it got kind of hard for me to go to these things, you know?
Yeah.
Not because I wasn't able to get pregnant, but because just my life hadn't taken off in that direction yet. So there are just lots of reasons. And if we can be open and honest with people, I think it'll only strengthen your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So should we move on to birth story number 2?
Sure. So, even after everything, I was very aware as I went through everything with my first pregnancy and the delivery and having him as a newborn. I very much had at the front of my mind, like, this could be the only one I have, just because it had been so hard to get pregnant with him. I didn't have another 8.5 years to wait for the next one. So, just with fertility age and everything. So, I was already considered like a geriatric pregnancy, or however they label you. So I was really trying to be in the moment for all the weird feelings you have when you're pregnant and all the fluttering and all of the newborn stuff. I was really trying to be so present for that, knowing in the back of my head, I may not get to experience this again. And already so grateful that I did, because I really had gotten to the point where I don't want to say I gave up, but I got to the point where I had to understand that I may not get to experience this in my life. So when I did, I really tried to treasure that and appreciate it and just go with it. And you did not hear me complain a whole lot about anything related to my baby, because I just wasn't in that headspace. I was just really grateful for all of it. So, but I really, in the back of my head, I wanted another one or two, and we didn't know if we'd have to go back and do more fertility treatments or not. I did at my first postpartum, or my second postpartum, I don't remember, appointment, I did refuse birth control. That's another thing that they, I guess, usually recommend for mothers, so you don't get pregnant within the first 9 months after giving birth, or year after giving birth, I guess. So, but I did refuse the birth control. I was like, look, it was so hard to get pregnant the first time. I highly doubt I'm going to get pregnant in 5 minutes. I just didn't even think that would be possible. But the other fear I had was to put birth control back in my body, because I didn't know if that was what messed me up in the first place. I had been on birth control for about 5 years before we started trying to get pregnant. So I don't know if that had anything to do with messing up my body to make it harder for me to get pregnant at all. Since we never got answers, we still really don't know why that happened. But I knew for sure I did not want to put birth control back in my body if I was wanting to have another child. So I refused that, and I just tracked everything very religiously. I use an app now, and I think that's what I started using then. It's like a calendar app, and there's several of them out there where you can mark the first and last days of your period. You can mark when you have cramps, you can mark when you're moody, when you have migraines, when you have, all of these things you can mark. So I just started tracking everything very specifically to avoid getting pregnant in the beginning. And then after a couple of years, I started well, was it a couple of years? Might have been a year and a half. Yeah, I think it was around the time he turned 2, or as we were approaching his second birthday, we started being more deliberate with allowing ourselves to get pregnant, I guess I should say. So I want to say it took 8 or 9 months of intentionally trying to get pregnant with my second one. So it was much shorter months instead of years, but still not in the 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 month period that a lot of people have. It still took, I think I want to say it was 8 or 9 months of really every month intentionally trying to get pregnant. So when I got pregnant with her, I was able to allow myself to celebrate more when it happened, and we didn't have as much fear as we did the first time. And obviously the second time around, you know your body and you know what's going to happen, and all of that stuff is more comfortable. So I still had some reservations because I was older. I was 38, almost 39 when I had her. So we did a lot more testing, genetic testing, DNA testing, all of those things, just to check on all of that. One of my mom's best friends around that age had a baby with Down syndrome, but she didn't know until she gave birth. And so her advice had always been, she wished she would have known in advance, because then you can start looking at resources and things like that. So my child doesn't have Down syndrome, but I was very aware that my age and, everything I wanted to know, so I could prepare if that was the case. So we did all those kind of testings, and those are more suggested and available when you are in your late 30s, early 40s. That was more, I believe I had better insurance coverage with that too because of my age. So we did all of that and everything was fine. And our home renovation was still not quite done, but at a much better space than it was the first time. So that was good. The funny thing was, when we went to those early appointments for my daughter, the due date they gave us was my son's birthday. And I was just like, come on, really? And so apparently I can only get pregnant at one time of year. So that kind of was our joke. If we had another one, we had to make sure it was on the opposite side of the year. But so her due date was his birthday, which I was not excited about, but whatever. I was having a second baby. I had a boy the first time. I'd had a girl. And this is totally silly and shallow, but I had always wished, prayed, whatever you want to say, for a boy and a girl. That's what I always had wanted. And I really always wanted 3, but I always had asked, I want a boy and a girl. I want a boy and a girl, kind of in a silly way. When I started the fertility journey, I just was like, I'll take anything, but in the end, I got my boy and a girl. And I always tell my kids that, you are the boy and the girl that I always prayed for and I always asked for. So that did end up in a sweet way. But so she was due on my son's birthday. And 3 weeks before that, I went to bed. Both my kids wanted to come into the world when I had not slept. So I went to bed at night at 10 o'clock or something. And 11 o'clock, I wake up. And so, after you sleep for barely an hour, no one is really with it. And everything felt wet. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think my water broke. And so my husband was already asleep. My baby was asleep. So I tiptoed to the bathroom, turned on the light, and there's blood everywhere. And I was like, okay. So go back into my bedroom, wake up my husband. I'm like, there's blood everywhere. I need to call the hospital, the doctor. So I called it's 11 something at night, of course. So I called their on-call thing. She calls me back and she's like, yeah, you need to get to the hospital. And I was like, okay. So I was not having contractions. I did not feel like I was in labor. My water had not broken. So I was just kind of like, what is going on? So I was a little scared, but oddly calm for some reason. So we got there and she was like, we need to do an emergency. Oh, so apparently I had placental abruption and they were like, were you in a car accident? What were you doing today? And I was like, I was literally asleep in bed. I was not doing anything to cause physical trauma. I went to work today and sat at my desk. I mean, I did nothing that would cause this. And so they're like, we usually only see this, when people have gone through physical trauma, but we joke now, my daughter is a Spitfire. So we joke now that totally her personality that she tried to like bust out of there early. But she loves that story. It's so funny. And she's like, I was trying to get out of there. And I was like, you were. Thanks for that. But so they were like, we have to do an emergency C-section. You're losing too much blood. I think I was only dilated like 2 centimeters or something. I was not having contractions, not what I wanted, but you know what? I'm bleeding all over the place. We're going to do whatever you say. So the other complication here was it was in the middle of the night. It was after midnight when we got to the hospital, and our lovely friends, if you listen to this, we're not mad at you, but the people who were going to take my son when I went into labor with my daughter, it was the middle of the night and they weren't answering their phone and it was 3 weeks early. So we were like, okay, I guess we'll just bring him in the car. It's going to be a while before I have her anyway, right? Hopefully they'll wake up at some point and see these text messages and my husband can take him over there or whatever. So we go to the hospital and things are happening kind of quickly. C-section. So I'm like, okay, well, he'll be out in the hallway with my son or whatever while they do the C-section. That's like, I was prepared to have this baby without my son in the room or without my husband in the room because my son was there. And it's the middle of the night. What were we going to do? You know, and we live in a city where we have no family here. So it wasn't like we could call our parents or sibling or something. So we're just kind of going with it. Like, okay, well, he may not be in the room. And that's just what we might have to do. So they're like, we're going to go prepare the OR C-section. I'm like, okay, fine. So like, we'll be back in 10 minutes or whatever it is. So she comes back in 10 or 15 minutes, like, okay, we're going to take you to the OR. She goes, let me just check you one more time to see if you've dilated any further. And I dilated to 10 centimeters in like less than 15 minutes. Yeah. So she's like, well, let's just do this. And I had started to have some contractions, like it was starting. So thankfully they were giving me the epidural anyway, because I was going to have a C-section. So I'm like, as long as the epidural's there, I'll do whatever you want. So we started. And so she was born, I think, less than 3 hours after we got to the hospital. So she came super fast. And my son was in the room, my almost 3-year-old son, which it's not as bad as it sounds. He didn't see anything. We made sure he was behind me way back in the room. He had an iPad. I think he was watching Blippi, for people who know who that is. We made sure there was like a table in the way. Like he couldn't see anything, but he could hear me pushing. So I don't think he remembers this now, but like for the next year, he'd be like, Mom, do you remember when you pushed out? And he'd say his sister's name. And he'd be like, remember you were like, ah, you know? He's making noise. And I'm like, yes, I remember that. Thank you. I really hope a day comes where you don't remember that. I don't think he remembers that anymore. But for like the first year after that, he would tell the story and I'd be like, oh my God, please forget this, child. Please forget that you were there. So I was also a little more controlled in all of noises, you know, what I was saying, everything, because he wasn't even 3 yet. He was about to turn 3 in 3 weeks, but remember her original birthday was on his birthday. But so I was just like, oh my God, I cannot believe I have to have this baby with him sitting in the room. But it was like, you know, 1:30 in the morning, no one was answering their phone. Like, what were we going to do? And the nurses were, I was surprised with this. The nurse was like, oh, this happens all the time. And I was like, are you just saying that to make us feel better? Like that happens all the time. Like 3-year-olds are sitting in here. Has that been your experience, Kelly? Like I was shocked by that. I was like, really?
I mean, 1 or 2 times. I have a friend who delivered with her daughter there. She was a labor and delivery nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember what the story was behind it, but she did. And her daughter was about the same age.
Mine was not intentional, but it wasn't as bad as I was fearing. As they were going, like, it's okay, he can stay. And I was like, what? Like, it's like, I don't want him in here for this, but
it's not recommended,
right.
But we tried to not make it traumatic for the child.
And I felt like a lot of that was kind of on me. I was just trying to, not that I was like screaming when because I had an epidural. It wasn't I wasn't in pain like that. But, you know, contractions are still really intense and you have to push really hard. So I was trying to not scare him. Like that was really at the forefront. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of part of my birth experience, is trying to focus on what I was doing, but at the same time, and it was happening really fast and I was losing a lot of blood, but I was trying not to freak him out, you know, and I kept kind of looking over to make sure he was still there. I was like, what if he gets up from the chair and like walks over here? So, you know, trying to make sure he was not moving, you know, he kept being told like, do not get up from this chair, but you know, he's barely 3. So you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, all of that was unplanned, but it was fine. And she was born in same hospital. And one of the nurses was the same. And I remember because she's in her full nun habit at this hospital, and she was nice the first time around. The second time around, she came into my room. So again, I'd gotten not even an hour of sleep before I woke up with all this blood, and I'd been at work all day. So by the time everything was kind of settled in and we went through the whole next day, I'd been awake for 48 hours then, I guess. She came in and she said, "When is the last time you actually slept?" And I was like 48 hours ago. And she was like, "I'm going to take the baby for 8 hours and I'm not going to come back for 8 hours." And I was like, after my last experience, I looked at her, I was like, "Are you serious?" And she was like, "Someone will probably come in and take your blood pressure or something at some point." But she's like, "I'm going to leave for 8 hours and I want you to sleep." And I was just like, oh my God. It was just the complete opposite of what had happened to me in the same hospital 3 years before. So I was so grateful because my husband had gone home, taken our son home, to go to bed for the night. My mom wasn't there yet because she was born. Was that the day before Thanksgiving? It was Thanksgiving week. So my mom left my dad and my brother to fend for themselves. She's like, "Here's how you reheat these things I already made," and then whatever. So they had a great Thanksgiving. And we didn't have one at all because we were like, forget it. I'm not making anything. Who cares? So so she hadn't been there yet. So this nurse was just like, "I'm going to take the baby for 8 hours. You go to sleep." And I was like, oh my God. And that made such a huge difference going home. And it was just totally, totally different. And I just appreciated that so much.
Yeah. She was literally sent by God.
Yeah, I think so. I know she walks in her little nun habit.
That's amazing.
When she was just like, no one had even asked me that the first time. I know that there's a huge difference between mothers having their first children versus mothers having not their first child, but it was just night and day for me. And I was so grateful for that.
Yeah. I really try to encourage nap time. I think it's really important.
Yeah, but when she said 8 hours, I was not expecting that, I mean, I was thinking maybe she could be 4.
Well, if they have the capacity in the nursery.
Well, and I guess because it was the night before Thanksgiving, maybe the hospital just wasn't as busy. I mean, I don't know. It was a weird time too. It seemed quieter. It wasn't a special day. People were trying to get on their birth certificate or something, but
they weren't trying to make their child born on Thanksgiving.
No.
Thanksgiving is one of those days where people make up ailments in order to avoid being with their family.
That is hilarious.
And they come into the hospital.
Well, I guess because I was at a women's hospital that is mostly lady issues. I don't know. I mean, they have an emergency room, but
oh, no. It's people will fake labor.
Oh my God.
To get away from their family.
That's hilarious. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
I'd rather swallow this gigantic medical bill than have to stay here another minute.
I don't think they're thinking of that. Because a labor and delivery triage visit is the same price as an emergency room visit, ladies.
Yeah, don't fake that.
So don't do the fake thing because it's gonna cost you. Ooh. Yeah, call your doctor and decide whether or not you really need to come in.
Gosh,
that's important.
Yeah.
Was there anything from your first delivery that colored your experience? Not necessarily the delivery, but anything with your first birth experience that you took with you to the next experience that helped you with the delivery or the postpartum or anything like that?
I mean, definitely the diaphragm elevator down pushing for sure. That was probably the biggest help I took with me. My OB-GYN had advised me to not even try breastfeeding because of how traumatic that was the first time. And, I was pushing 40 and she said that if it didn't work last time, it's not very likely that it would all of a sudden work when I'm older, And she just really had sat down with me and said, some women just can't. Sometimes they don't have, I don't even know the right terminology, so I'm going to butcher this, but either milk ducts just don't work, or sometimes people have fewer of them, or, there's just like breast density and like all these different things can impact that. And I had not had a mammogram yet at that point, so we didn't know anything about tissue or anything with the makeup of my body and what could be contributing to that. But she really talked to me in advance because she did not want me to go through that again. So I frankly, I didn't try. And also because we had learned with my son that it wouldn't have even mattered anyway because of the allergy he had. So I was a little bit torn about that going in with my daughter, and I don't even remember ever feeling milk come in like that. I had a little heaviness feeling, but I never felt milk come in. So that was kind of a confirmation for me too, that I didn't feel all the physical stuff that they say you feel your milk is ready. So I think I went into that a little more healthy mentally and how I thought about it, because I didn't have any expectations anymore, and I didn't put that pressure on myself, and the hospital didn't either this time. And I really do think she put something in my chart that was like, leave her alone because of what happened last time. So that was definitely different. But I think because the circumstances under which I went to the hospital with all the blood and everything, it was just a different situation. So there wasn't, with my son, there was all these hours and hours of labor, and I'd been in labor all day by the time I went to the hospital. I'd been in labor like 15 plus hours, been having contractions already, where with her, it was like blood everywhere go, so it was such a different state I was in when I arrived there, that I think I was just like, do whatever you need to do, because it was more of an emergency situation.
Yeah, that's fair. Was there anything else that you want to share? Anything you want to tell new moms? Anything that we didn't cover?
And I know you're trying to do this, Kelly, like as far as walking the line between learning as much as you can without freaking yourself out,
Yeah.
Because you don't want to become like a hypochondriac of maternity issues, So I think a huge thing that's really cool too is that it's pretty crazy what our bodies can do as women, and trusting that and thinking about, like, one thing that I really thought about is, women have been doing this for thousands of years, and we are in an era where everything of your body can be monitored and tested and checked. And of course, things tragically go wrong sometimes, but I think trusting your body and just trying to go with it. I think some people have, I had some friends with birth plans that were so specific. Just listening to them in advance, it just makes you think you got to lower some expectations here. Be willing to be flexible, right? And also not be so stuck to how you want it to go that you're not listening to a medical expert who's trying to help you and protect your life and the life of your baby. So I think that was one advantage I had, just having medical professionals in my family. I was already used to doing that. And I already understood the importance of, I'm not a doctor and I can want my epidural, but if something happens to where I can't have my epidural, I'm going to have to go with that, and not complain about it or, fight for something that is not possible because they got to move quickly to save somebody. So I think that's the other thing, is to, of course, there's things we all want within our experience or ideals that we have, but you need to be prepared to do whatever needs to be done to make sure you and your baby are okay.
I think too, it's important to remember to find a provider that you align with.
Yeah.
And once you find, not just blindly trust a provider.
Sure.
To find a provider that has built your trust.
Yeah. And I want to clarify, I was just going to say, in that, I'm saying that in the context of, I was at a hospital that I really trusted, and I had a doctor that I really trusted. And I knew that the hospital I was delivering at is where they sent the scary cases and they life flighted the people. And that's where people wanted to be. So I already had a huge trust in where I was, because that was their thing. Like, it's a women's hospital. Like, that was their thing. That was what they were really good at. So I'm saying that in the context of that for myself. And I know not everybody has that. One of my very best friends had a really traumatic birth experience and was at a facility that she later learned was probably not where she should have been delivering, unfortunately, So yeah, absolutely making sure that you have a provider that you trust and that you're choosing the best environment that you can for what you need to have done.
Yeah. I like to rephrase birth plans as birth preferences.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I like to talk to my patients about what my hopes are for them. And I usually start off by saying, I think we can both come together and agree that what we both want for this outcome is a healthy mom and a healthy baby. And in order for me to keep you and your baby safe, there are some interventions that might be recommended and go from there. A lot of the birth plans that I get, they come in and they're just what we do with every patient. Like we will do delayed cord clamping. Most of the time, we won't start the Pitocin unless the labor slows down. Most of the time, what we're doing is for necessity. Now, if there's an induction, that's a whole different thing because we are starting the labor process for a medical reason. But yeah, just aligning with your provider, having birth preferences, that's fair, but knowing that it is flexible is super, super
I
important.
did not write a birth plan, even though the class I took told me that we should. I didn't. Even sadly, people were like, I want certain music or I want whatever. I'm a trained musician. I have 2 degrees in music and I didn't care about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the husband's job anyway.
Well, and I don't know if part of it's my age because I was older. I mean, maybe if I was 10 or 12 or 15 years younger, maybe that would have been different. I don't know. But, I was kind of at the age where I was like, I didn't need the environment or the fanfare that
bells and whistles.
It was enough that it was just happening. I think that was it too. I was so grateful that it was just happening, that I was like, I don't need anything else. Like, I'm just gonna get a baby, and I've wanted it for so long, and it was so hard to just get to this point. I don't need all the other stuff. Yeah.
Well, Carrie, if you don't have anything else, I am gonna wrap up. Thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Thank you so much for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future episodes. Don't forget to share the podcast with a friend who can benefit from the valuable insights that we share here. And if you could take a moment to leave a 5-star rating and review, it would mean the world to me. If you're ready to work one-on-one with me to embark on a transformational journey towards a confident and empowered hospital birth experience, go to kellyhof.com/empowered and enroll in my Empowered Hospital Birth Coaching Program. Together, we'll create a roadmap to a birth experience that you'll cherish forever. That's KELLYHOF.com/empowered. Let's make your birth experience extraordinary.